This time I'll make the bottom layer of the trophy. It's 9 inches in diameter and 3 3/4 inch tall. My plan is to use a piece of perforated metal as the perimeter of this layer. So I've cut this to size and I need to roll it into a cylinder. So it needs to be 9 inches in diameter. I have a piece of 6-inch tubing here, and I think with the spring back I get, this should be pretty close to the right size. So I'll slip the perforated metal under the tube, roll it around, and we'll see what I get. So let's check that with our disc, and it's a pretty close match. So now I'll weld the ends of this band together. This is a delicate job, but that's the beauty of the TIG welding process. I'll hammer these welds against this aluminum tube to level everything out. Okay, I'd say that came out great. I'll sand this weld down flush now. And then I'll go over this with a dual action sander. I'm going to make a flat aluminum disc that goes on both the top and the bottom of this layer, and I want to put a flange on the edge of it so it will center itself on this part. So to do that, I'm going to make a form. I have 2 pieces of MDF that I'll sandwich the aluminum between, and then I can form this edge over. And I'm actually going to do the forming on the lathe, but before I do the forming, I have to accurately size these discs. So I'll do that on the lathe too. I'm going to center everything on the center hole in all parts, so I need to put an arbor in the lathe. I'll put this in a 4-jaw chuck. And I'll put a bolt in that center hole. I put a metal threaded insert in this hole. It's called a T-nut. So I'll use a dial indicator to center this disc in the chuck. I'll put this right on the surface of the bolt. Lock it in place, and then see how much run out I have. It's just a few thousandths, but we want to get it as close as we can. Well, that's within about 1/1000th of an inch, and I'm going to say that's good enough for this part. So the arbor is centered, and now I'll put the discs on the arbor and turn them to size. And I'm going to put a center in this bolt. I already drilled the center hole in the bolt, and this will help make sure everything is aligned properly. And it will give my setup a little more rigidity as well. So let's spin this and see how it's operating. That seemed to be spinning pretty true. So now I'll turn this to diameter. The diameter I need is 8.815 inches, and we're just a little over that. So I'll start turning this down. The carriage is hitting the face of this now, so I'll have to turn this in two operations. I'll do this portion first. I have about 50 thousandths to go. Fifteen thousandths to go. And we're right on the money there. So I need to change my setup a little bit to machine this little portion at the edge. I'll just extend my tool post a little bit. So I'll check that diameter. Looks like we're good. I'll use a file to deburr this back edge. And this disc is going to be the form I use to clamp the piece of aluminum to the back form. I'm going to put a 45-degree chamfer on this just to help the process. And I'll use a file to deburr the edges. So our form is completed. I'm going to put a mark on all these parts so I know how they fit together best. Okay, now I can cut the aluminum discs. I've cut a disc of aluminum, which will be our first part. This is 50 thousandths thickness 3003 H14 aluminum, and I cut it slightly oversized. So the first step is to trim this down to the proper size, and I'll use the lathe to do the trimming. So let's get all the pieces assembled. I'm going to get my registration marks in alignment and assemble this on the arbor. I'm going to get my center support in place. Okay, everything looks good. So I'll put my tool post in place to cut the blank down. I want a 300 thousandths flange, and we're at 400 thousandths now. So I need to take off 50 thousandths on each side. 10 more thousandths. Okay, we're on size, and I'll use a file to deburr this edge. Now I'll use a roller to start forming this flange. So I'll move the tool post to 30 degrees now. So that's about as far as I can go with this tool post. I had to get kind of creative with this setup. So now the shaft that holds the bearing will fit in this slot for the tool post. And I made a special hole down for it. I'll go for a little more angle. So the compound feed is at 90 degrees now. I have to extend this just a little bit. So there is our flange. Let's break down this setup. And I'll bet this disc is locked on pretty tightly, but it looks like the forming came out beautifully. This aluminum disc really got locked tightly onto the wooden form. So the way I'm going to get them apart is I'll drive a punch into the wood, leaving just a small gap between the wood and the metal. And I'll put a screwdriver into that space and just twist the screwdriver, which will start to pry that metal disc off the wood. I'll do that in a couple of spots. Okay, I think it's ready to pop off now. So there's our aluminum disc with a beautifully formed flange. And the last thing I want to do to this is to form a curve on the edge of this. And I'll use the bead roller for that. I've done a few tests on the setup for the bead roller, and what seems to work best for me is a 6mm die on the top and a 7mm die on the bottom. And I have to put the piece of metal in first before I put this little wooden guide strip in on the bottom. And what this wooden guide strip does is it makes sure that the metal stays absolutely vertical as it goes through the dies. And you can see I put lines on the metal so I can tell when I've made a full revolution. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to go down one full turn for the starting pass. Okay, I've made one lap. I'll go down another half turn. And then I'll go down to 2 full turns. And I'll back it off 2 turns. So I think you can see already what a beautifully rounded edge it's put on the part. Quite a difference from the square edge that we started with. So let's check the fit, see how these parts fit together. I'd say that's a perfect fit. I'm very happy with that. So now that I know these processes and dimensions work fine, I'll go ahead and make the cap for the other side. We're going to use a 1/4" threaded rod to hold all the layers together. So each layer will have a hole in the center. The top layer will have a threaded hole that this threaded rod can engage. This bottom layer needs to have a recess in the bottom so the nut that snugs everything together can fit flush. But in addition to this center rod, I want to have something that holds all of these 3 elements together, even when it's not assembled as the full trophy. So my plan for that is to use a wooden dowel. So this is the right size. So if each of these faces is snugged up tight against that wooden dowel, it all fits together flush. I want to have a consistent hole pattern in all these parts. So I've made a template. This template has the 1/4" center hole and 3 holes that locate the screws. So I'll use this template to drill the wooden dowel on both ends so I have a consistent hole pattern. The drill size I need for the number 6 screw is 90 thousandths. So I'll drill the first hole. Then to keep my fixture aligned, I'll put another drill bit in that hole, upside down. Then I can drill the next hole. And the next hole. I'll flip this around and do the other side. So I have the holes in both ends of this now, and I need to also drill both of the aluminum faces for the bottom layer. I'll use a scrap piece of wood as a backing, and I'll use a bolt to align my drill guide with the part to be drilled. I'll get all of this put together, and we'll drill the first hole. I'll put a second drill in that hole to keep the alignment. Drill the next hole, and the final hole. So I'll drill the second cover in the same way, then I'll use a dimple die so the screw heads fit flush. I opened up these holes so there's clearance for the screw, and I made my own dimple die. I took a piece of round stock, I drilled a hole in it the size of the screw, then I used a countersink to make a recess for the head to fit into. So I'll show you how this works. First we put the screw in the hole. So the screw is actually the male part of the die. Then we put the female part over the screw and tap it with a hammer. That does a great job of making the screw head fit flush. We'll do that to the other two holes. And we're done. It's time for the final assembly. I've decided to play fast and loose with the finish on these parts. I spun this part in a lathe and ran Scotch-Brite over it. That's what gives it this beautiful grained finish. I like that, but we're going to see what Paul does. You never know. He might be working with ostrich feathers and snake skin. So we'll wait and see on that. So let's put the pieces together. I'll put the perforated band into place. And I plan to put something inside here so you can't see through the holes. I don't yet know what color that's going to be, but let's start with red. So we'll put that band into place. And now let's put the top cover into place. And I'll get the screws started. So here's the base layer for our trophy. And I think this came out absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see the layers that Paul's going to do, and I've got 2 more layers to do myself. So tune in next time and you can see what we come up with. If you want to enter the raffle, post a comment saying Trophy Trophy and you'll be in the running. You can enter only once for each of my videos and once for each of Paul's, so you'll have multiple opportunities to win this one-of-a-kind handcrafted trophy. If you want to make a general comment or ask a question, send that as a separate comment. Once the trophy is completed, we'll have a drawing and the winner will be notified. I'm looking forward to this fantastic opportunity, and both Paul and I will be posting videos shortly.